Welcome to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books with Zibby. I'm the host, Zibby Owens. I am an author. My latest is Blank, pub date March 1st, a novel. I'm also a podcaster, obviously, a publisher, a bookstore owner, and so much more. If you love books, you're in the right place. In fact, we call it the Zibbyverse, or really, the LA Times called it the Zibbyverse, and we're going with it. Go to zibbyowens.com to learn more and follow me on Instagram at zibbyowens. The following was a conversation held at Zibby's Bookshop, my independent bookstore in Santa Monica, California, and it was really fabulous, and I think you all should hear it. It was between Hazel Hayes and Aparna Nancherla. Hazel Hayes is an Irish-born, London-based author and director who for many years wrote primarily for the screen. Having graduated from Dublin City University with a degree in journalism, she went on to study creative writing at the Irish Writers Center before honing her craft as a screenwriter through numerous short films and sketches. Her 8-part horror, Prank Me, won Series of the Year at SITC, as well as the Award for Excellence in Storytelling at Buffer Festival in Toronto. Out of Love was her first novel, and Better by Far is coming out soon. Aparna Nancherla is a comedian and general silly billy. Her sense of humor is dry, existential, and absurd, with notes of uncalled-for whimsy. Think A Wine You Didn't Order. Her book, Unreliable Narrator, Me, Myself, and Imposter Syndrome, is currently available. She was also on my podcast for this book, but it was really cool to hear her talk to Hazel. You can hear Aparna as the voice of Moon on Fox's The Great North, or have heard her as the voice of Hollyhock on BoJack Horseman. You can currently watch Aparna in The Drop on Hulu, or as Dr. Pocha on Lopez vs. Lopez. You may have watched Aparna as Grace, the belabored HR rep on the critically acclaimed Comedy Central show Corporate. She also has a half-hour special on the second season of The Stand-Ups on Netflix, as well as appearances on Late Night with Stephen Colbert on CBS and Two Dope Queens on HBO. Other acting credits include A Simple Favor, Modern Love, Bob's Burgers, Crashing, Master of None, and Inside Amy Schumer. She's written for Totally Biased with W. Camus Bell and Late Night with Seth Meyers, as well as Mythic Quest on Apple+. Aparna was named one of the 50 funniest people right now by Rolling Stone, and in 2019, she was in a Super Bowl commercial with Michael Bublé for sparkling wine, nay, seltzer. In 2016, she released her debut album, Just Putting It Out There, on Tig Notaro's label, Benson Ball Records, and recorded a half-hour special for Comedy Central. She was also chosen as one of Variety's top 10 comics to watch that year. Aparna currently lives in Los Angeles, if you can even imagine.
All righty. Gorgeous. Well, yeah, thank you again for coming. Genuinely appreciate it. My name is Hazel Hayes. This is Aparna Nancherla.
Hello.
And we're just going to have a little chat about our work, writing, about feelings maybe. I feel like feelings are going to come up probably because they do. Yeah, relevant feelings. And read a couple little excerpts and take some questions. And I believe there's people watching at home as well. So hello.
Hello.
Yeah, we'll just dive on in.
Yeah.
We don't know each other
we met one time.
We met one time, and this is actually our first actual probably conversation.
Yeah, which feels very natural.
It's nice. Sometimes I've done these kinds of things with people I know very well already, and it's almost harder because you're asking questions you already know the answer to.
Right.
But in this case, I really don't know.
And we have not finished each other's books.
Not fully finished because we're very busy women.
Yeah, but I thought we should just name it instead of letting people guess.
No, for sure. We did speak briefly. I called you the day to be like, I have not finished your book.
Yeah.
And she was like, I have not finished your book. But that's good.
But I was
going
listening to it on the ride over here.
You were listening to me reading it?
Because you read it and it's so good. It really puts you in it.
Thank you. Yeah. I feel like I'm way more Irish when I'm reading as well.
I'm not going to lie.
It's a different
I love an accent.
Who doesn't? Who doesn't love an accent? So, yes, your book, which, by the way, it's one of those titles that, like, I'm annoyed I didn't come up with this by myself. Unreliable Narrator, and it's about imposter syndrome. And I'm like, that's so clever. I wish I had thought of this. But diving straight in, the way that you talk about imposter syndrome is so real. I found myself reading it being like, do I have this? I feel like if I did, I'd be like, oh, hard relate. But instead, I feel like someone slightly on the outside understanding it more from your perspective.
Do you feel like it's something you don't deal with?
Don't at all, but definitely not to the levels that you're describing in the book. I think I've definitely had that feeling of like, I'm having it right now, honestly. You're sort of sitting in a room full of people looking and you're like, why are you looking at me? Like, what did I do? Yeah, I've had that thing of getting the job or getting published or getting the thing and sort of being worried it's not good enough still.
Yes.
I actually, no, maybe I do have it now that I'm saying it. I had a thing where my publisher, so the Out of Love came out in the UK with a crowdfunding publisher called Unbound because no one would have me. So I crowdfunded it and then it did well. And then Penguin Random House picked it up in the US. And I remember when I got really good feedback from them, from my editor there, especially Cassidy Sachs, great name. And she was saying all these wonderful things. And then I convinced myself that they probably say really nice things about shit books too.
Basically anything they're championing, they have to be positive.
Yeah, so what I did was try to convince myself that my publisher is an idiot so that I could believe that I'm not good enough. You know what I mean? Instead of just like...
Yeah, it's very Groucho Marx, you know, like I would not want to be a member of any club that would have me
as a member. Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I feel that way too, where like I was lucky enough to sell the book just based off of like a rough outline and the idea. And it's like, why not write a book about self-doubt? You know, I'm like so good at it. I've been experiencing it my whole life. And then, you know, it turns out self-doubt is not a very great collaborator, because when I was writing the book, I was like, oh, it seems like you really don't want me to finish. and I think that's kind of fair though. Like, I honestly feel like it would have been more, like I would have had more integrity to write a book about imposter syndrome. And then it just like, it's like half of it is blank, you know?
Yeah. There's so many jokes you could have made.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's already a pretty funny book. I was laughing out loud reading it, and I could kind of hear it in your voice too. But yeah, did you have to resist the urge to like not go for the bit all the time with it?
I think I addressed that right away, but then I was like, I can't keep talking about that. Like, if someone actually is like taking the time to read this, like I should offer something besides the joke about how I do not feel capable of writing it.
Yeah. How do you feel now that it's done and published and it is a thing in the world? Do you feel any differently?
I don't know. As someone who has never, it's like my first book, and I've had other things come out in terms of like, I do stand up, and I've had, TV sets come out or acting roles. And it feels, something about a book is so personal that it feels like once it's out there, it does feel a little bit like you like ripped your heart out of your body and you're like, what do you guys think? Like
I have no idea what that's about. I don't know what you mean. It's a completely foreign feeling.
Yeah. Any notes? So
Any notes on my heart? On my soul?
So I think I've had to like detach a little from the feedback, because I think, your relationship to something you write is always going to be different than someone who reads it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. On the flip side of me thinking my editor was an idiot for liking the book, I will then do things like when I get a shit review, I go and look at books that I know are objectively good and look at their, like I went,
for sure.
I looked up like Joan Didion on Goodreads and saw some people saying horrible things about her books. I was like, you're just wrong.
I know.
Which means they might be wrong about me.
I know. You're like, if Margaret Atwood got a 3, like I'm not doing so bad.
Yeah. I got a 1-star review from a lady who did not like my use of the C word.
Okay, but that's has nothing to do with skill level.
Ironically, she is one. But there we have it. That's
wait, I have a question though. Do you read your bad reviews, or is it just if you happen
I love them.
What?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I get great mileage out of my bad reviews.
Like you like to use them to turn them into something,
no,
or just
laugh at them. I just like I don't know. I've posted them too.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of like, 5-star review, 4-star review. Aren't I great? And then every once in a while I want to throw in like, here's a 1-star. This bitch was bored. One of them was just 2 stars, bored. All caps, exclamation mark. And I'm like, because you have to, you take the good with the bad.
No, that's
good. And I'm not for everyone. And like I always say, like I don't really like chocolate ice cream.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's bad, right? So audible gasps. Yeah, like I would prefer strawberry. But that doesn't mean it's bad. So that's how I try and look at it.
I think I'm fine with the like theoretical idea that I'm not for anybody, but I do not need to see it in print.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Also, my bad reviews haven't been horrible.
Okay.
It's not like, when we talk about don't read the comments, and I know that you read your comments. Not sure. Why would you say that? Aparna, I called you Nancherla. I'm so sorry.
We know each other really well.
We're on second name terms. But yeah, I don't really read comments on videos and that kind of stuff that go up now, because I think it's also like, here's the thing, if someone has taken the time to read an entire book and they have thoughts on it, I'm like, that's valid.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to give that the time of day. But I do feel like the anonymous internet troll is a different person who I'm not.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm also suspicious of anything that only has good reviews.
Suspicious.
That makes me question it. You know, I'm like really?
Paddington 2. You're like, really?
Yeah. I'm like, nobody saw the
undercurrent. No one hates this bear. This adorable bear. Something suspicious about it.
Wait, I have a question though. You're talking about Out of Love, right? Your first book in terms of it being crowdfunded, and then
yes.
Okay. Do you feel differently about your next? Did you have a different process with your next book that's coming out?
Yeah, very actually. So the second novel is called Better by Far, and one hopes it is. Ha ha ha. How many times am I going to make that joke?
Every event.
Time. Yeah, it was I think getting Out of Love off the ground felt so much more like a labor of love and a kind of an uphill battle. And I was going out to publishers and every single one of them was like, but if it's told in reverse and they know the end, why will they keep reading?
Yeah.
No, thank you. So everyone said no to me. And that's when I went with Unbound, who, like I said, were crowdfunding. And it felt really like, and not in a bad way, it felt like I really had a community on board. I went out with it and I was like, listen, guys, I have to crowdsource this. If you pre-order, this is how I get to make the book. And it did, and the sales were really, really good. And it just felt like there was this whole team behind me of like thousands of people who gave a shit. So this time around, I think was probably a more easier in one sense, because Penguin were like, here's some money, go write a book.
Yeah.
But more lonely, maybe a little more isolated. I kind of felt like I was just
like
squirreled away. Yeah. And like no one even really knows that like I'm doing this. And at the end of it, they'll just be one.
Yeah. I wonder if doing it with the crowdfunding kind of made it more communal, or like just
and
like it felt like people were invested in
and waiting.
Yes.
And wanted it.
Yes.
I think that was the big thing, because with this one, I'm like, does anyone want this? Right. Have they forgotten about me? Does anyone care? You know, am I gonna be locked in a room for all these years and then come out with a book and everyone's gonna be like, oh, who are you? Like, I don't know you.
I think that was a scary thing about writing too, a book for me, instead of, doing stand-up where the reaction is immediate.
I was going to ask, if you're right there, you're either getting the laughs or you're not. You know, if you're bombing or you're doing really well. How did that feel?
It felt like very
vacuum?
Scary. And I think it's like you were saying, like it kind of feels like if I'm not out there, will people remember me?
Yeah.
I think that's a feeling kind of all of us have with how online, how online everyone is these days, where it's like, if you're not posting, did you have that sandwich?
Did you have the sandwich? If a sandwich gets eaten in the woods and no one's around to insta it.
Did you eat it?
But Aparna, by the way, is a very, very funny comedian as well.
You.
I was also chuckling away at your stand-ups, just like doing my makeup, listening to you in the bathroom, just laughing away. But it's interesting how that's something I wanted to ask, actually, bringing the comedy to the page.
Yeah.
How did that translate for you? Because I kind of went from script writing into a book.
Did? Okay.
And that's a more visual medium into this. And you go from having your audience right there and being able to, I guess, perform the text.
Yeah.
Into trusting that someone's going to understand it from a page, or get the tone of it from a page.
Yeah, well, I knew ahead of time that the book wasn't going to be like strictly comedic. Like I knew it was going to be kind of a combination of some stuff that's more serious in my life, just like with mental health and, struggles with body image. And so I knew it wasn't going to just be like comedic, light, fluffy essays.
Yeah.
And so I was a little worried of like how to balance that seriousness with jokes, because I also felt like I couldn't write something without any jokes. So I often had kind of conversations with my editor that was like, does this feel funny enough? Is it making too light of this subject? Like it was kind of tricky finding that balance sometimes. It's
something I think about and talk about a lot. That's sort of the Nora Ephron thing of like owning your story. And if I deliver it a certain way, now I'm not the victim and I didn't get my heart broken. I'm actually telling this funny story about this thing that happened to me, and I get to tell it my way with my own ending.
Yeah.
Did you feel that? Because I know like what you talk about on stage, it almost feels, how do I put it? there's a flippancy to stand up that you don't have. There's a vulnerability with a book, and especially the topics that you're covering. You're talking about mental illness and eating disorders and body image and all that kind of stuff. Did you feel a catharsis in writing it your way?
I think I thought I would.
Okay.
That was the hope. I think sometimes I just got more in my own head, because I think you can sometimes go in circles with anxiety or depression where, you know, you're like, but then why do I do this? Or like, why? And then you just kind of end up like a snake eating its own tail. But I do think I wanted to write a book versus, you know, put some of this stuff in my stand-up, because like you're saying, stand-up does have, you know, kind of the removal of its like setup punchlines, kind of this neat package. And it's kind of, there's closure at the end. And I knew with a lot of these topics in my life, like there isn't a neat ending. And I feel like with a book, you can kind of sit in that ambiguousness more. But I was worried about how that would be received.
How has it been received?
I don't know, because I don't read any reviews.
Of course. By peers, by friends?
Friends have been nice, but I think it is even scary to imagine your friend reading it and being
like, that's awful.
Yeah. Because they're like, I thought I knew this woman, and no. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the thing of like, I would rather sing to 3,000 people than 3.
Yeah.
You know, it's just that intimacy of like having a friend or family.
Oh, family. Tough.
Family reading your book and then asking you questions. And then in the new one, so in the new one, the protagonist's mother died when she was young.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm home recently, desperately trying to finish the thing. And my mother keeps talking to me, bless her, she's wonderful, I love her. And she's like, she walks into the room one day and just announces that I've killed her off. Well, I don't know, Hazel, you killed me off in this one. Okay, one, they're all fictional characters. Like, there's no 2. That's it. They're fictional.
But you know, if an author's mom reads their book, they're going to be like, I'm the mom. I'm the mom.
Yeah.
I'm the mom.
And she, you know, in many ways, very much is the mother in Out of Love.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm hearing laughs over here. She is, and she isn't in other ways, but she saw so much of herself there. And that was lovely because it actually opened up conversations between us that I don't think we would have otherwise had. But yeah, she can't. I think the second one is weirdly at once more personal and also way more fictional.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's more removed from my life, and yet the feelings in it feel almost more personal to me. But yeah, she just can't quite get that they're not real people.
Yeah.
Like, I've killed her off. I'm like, you're not her.
I mean, I'm always doing that when I read authors like fiction books. I'm just like, that's them.
That's that thing. That's that guy.
But yeah, I was going to ask, with your first book where you decided to write it in reverse, did you know that from the beginning, or was that a decision you made?
No, that was, I had learned to write you're adorable. She's trying to get the content, guys, because if we don't get the content, we weren't even here.
Yeah, exactly. How will
they know?
As we said.
How will they know? It's the sneaking. Like no one saw because you were 1 foot lower. I love it. What was the question again?
Oh, just for Out of Love, the structure of it. Yeah.
Yes, sorry. So I had learned to write with short stories, and then I got into script writing for a very, very long time. So I was much more used to that. And then I wrote this short story about a breakup. It was just supposed to be a short story. I never knew what it was going to be. It was just one of those times when it just has to come out.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a script. It just came out in prose, and showed this story to various people, friends and my agent and stuff. And they were like, okay, yeah, bitch can write. Maybe could you do more? And he was particularly interested because he was like, money, obviously.
Yeah. Sure.
Book deal. He didn't love them when I wanted it in reverse and no one wanted to publish it, but he's happy now. Anyway, yeah, I wrote this story, and then it was that question of, can you make that a book? Could you go away and maybe make that a book? And I was sitting down thinking about it, was like, I can, but it felt so contained and wrapped up. Mm-hmm, by the end of that first chapter, they've gone through the breakup. She's done so much of her healing work. Yes. She's you feel by the end of that chapter, like she's made that 1 cup of tea and she's ready. Yeah. And that didn't feel like the ending of the book, but it also didn't quite feel like a beginning. I didn't want to move forward from there. That just didn't really interest me. So yeah, I think one of the big questions I always say that like when you go through a big breakup or anything, you leave a job or an ending of a chapter, you sort of reflect on it and you wonder, was that good for me? Was that right? Particularly if it doesn't end well, like, was I happy there? Were we ever happy together? And there was all these questions sort of swimming around. And so I decided to answer them instead and sort of then took the book backwards to do a sort of postmortem on the relationship. And look at two people who had fallen out of love in a sort of slow puncture way, because you often see in stories, it's this one big inciting incident or someone cheats or someone shouts or someone runs someone over with their car. Actually happened to a friend of mine. It's not funny. He's fine. Was
it an accident or on purpose?
No, we don't. Anyway, so the next thing I did was write the second chapter to see what it would be like to jump backwards. That little step, and then I wrote the very last chapter, which is the beginning of the relationship, and now I have A and B, and then I dotted about all over the place to get from there to there. So it was I
found it refreshing, because I think in my book I kind of talk about how I feel like as a society we love like an arc that starts like with someone struggling and then ends with triumph.
Oh, we love it.
And how that's like so often how life does not work. So I just am so much more interested in stories of failure, like the in-between of figuring things out, than the like resolution that I found that really like refreshing.
Thank you. Yeah. And same, I liked that bit when you were like, I'm interested in the failure.
Yeah.
We see so much success and we I'm interested in the person who came second or third, I think is what you said. And I'm like, that's a more tasty story to me. You can really kind of like sink your teeth into it a little bit more.
Yeah. And I also think with success, sometimes it's like you think you want it. And I mean, obviously I'm not saying nobody should get it or like it's not desirable, but you do get there and then you're kind of like, now what?
Yeah.
Absolutely. It kind of can be scarier in that way.
Yeah. Goals are awful. They're the worst thing, because I always think like you set these goals, like the big ambitious ones, the big ones. And I think you either don't reach the goal and then you feel crap that you didn't reach the goal, or you do reach the goal and you realize all your problems haven't gone away as a result of reaching the goal. So they're very tricky things. And you have, I think it's taken me a whole lifetime of, I guess, setting a new relationship with goals, and knowing that I'm going to put that there, but when I get there, let's set expectations around what that actually is. Like even with this, my first book's going to come out.
Right.
And then they'll know.
Then
they'll see, and then all the movie deal will come in and and then they'll want the second book or the third book and my life will change and I'll have so much money. And none of that happened. And it's great. I'm not complaining. I love that I got to write a second one. Right. But I think that was the level I needed to be at, was life will stay pretty much the same. Yeah. And then you'll get to write a second one and that will be nice.
Yeah.
And that's it.
I remember before my book came out, someone was like giving me advice who had a book come out and they were like, it's not going to be as good or as bad as you think it is. Like, it's going to be fine. Yeah. And sometimes that's like the worst thing to hear. You're like, fine. There's my blood in it.
Yeah.
My blood is fine.
My blood's on the page. Speaking of your blood on the page, would you like to read some?
Speaking to what we were talking about, I can read from the end, sort of as an homage to your book. Okay, so this is from the epilogue. Epilogue is just called I Tried. So I'll just read a little section. I wanted to write this book to fix my imposter syndrome. I assumed I could write my way out of it. But that's like saying I'm going to sleep my way through this plate of food. When you try to write about your core insecurities, it turns out that sometimes they get louder. It's like all those horror movies where you're not supposed to touch the old relics. You touch the old relics, the spirits get pissed. You try to fix the mental demons, the demons create a mosh pit on your sense of self. But there is something I learned in this whole process, an epiphany about epiphanies, if you will, and please don't, I implore you. They don't arrive on a schedule, and sometimes you're the last to know you're having one, because epiphanies can take years to sink in. Yes, of course, there are those moments that strike like a bolt of lightning with accompanying thunderclap, but more often there is no fanfare, and usually you still end up needing to relearn the lesson again. But hey, at least you remember it better the next time around, what with everything looking so familiar, like a dream you've had many times before. That's what I've learned about my own imposter syndrome. It's probably never going to really go away, but I can remember I've been here before. I'm late to most things in life. My own self-discovery had to be one of them if we're being on brand. This entire book has been an exercise in hesitation. I frequently felt as though the more of it that came together, the more of me that came apart. Yet here we are at the end somehow. Only there are no tidy conclusions, are there? Most everything I've written about remains open-ended in my own life, ongoing battles that must be faced and negotiated without fanfare. I wish I knew another way to do it, but this looks like it's it.
Beautiful. Yeah. It's so funny sometimes when you realize we could have been sitting here chatting about that for so long, and you've already you said it better already. You know what I mean? No. Sometimes someone just puts something into words, and you're like, that was the feeling. That was it. I just hadn't quite hit on that yet. But yeah, that's beautiful. And have you made peace with that? Like, not?
Yeah, I think at first I didn't. Or, I mean, I did with myself, but I think even in putting it out in the world, I sort of had that same feeling as you of like, now people will really get me. They'll like read what I said and then they'll like finally get. But, part of the book is about how I've always kind of felt like an outsider. And I think it made me realize that even writing about it isn't necessarily going to take that feeling away. Oh, yeah. But it is going to, hopefully connect with people when they read it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's the ups and downs. And it's interesting that you sort of said you didn't feel like you got the catharsis from it necessarily.
Yeah, but I think I also romanticize what catharsis should look like.
Right.
Like
we're back to the goals again.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I want it to be grand and like sweeping and cinematic.
Fixed.
Yes.
You want it to be fixed by it. Yeah, you hear people talk about writing it down and then they're fixed. And like, but where's mine?
Whereas sometimes it's like a feeling like personal growth will be like, you're at lunch and you like look at an Instagram thing and you're like, I didn't feel bad.
Wow.
I'm better today.
That's huge.
But it's like 2:00 on a Tuesday.
Yeah. But those are the little wins.
Yes.
Those are the things.
Yeah.
I didn't feel bad. It's such a huge
thing.
Yeah. I think I hadn't quite put it that way before, but with writing this, that was a similar thing with, I guess, looking back at past relationships and the regret and the resentment that you still harbor and the anger and all of that. I think having to get inside the mind of a character who sort of represented relationships I had been in, men I had been with, having to sort of get inside his skin and sympathize, I guess, because you can't write anyone, villain or not. Not that I think he's a villain in this book, but you can't without really sympathizing and really getting inside the decisions that they make and why they make them.
Right.
And I felt by the end of it, I was looking back more fondly at people, not just relationships, but just sort of people who'd kind of come and go from my life and friendships that had ended or whatever, things that had ended on bad terms, and just felt a little softer, I guess, about it. So that when their name did pop up, I just didn't feel quite as bad.
Right, like as charged.
It wasn't as raw, I guess. There was more of an understanding there for them.
Amazing.
Which I didn't expect. I think I expected a lot of like my own healing and a lot of more understanding about myself and my feelings. But like, even writing like the mother character, like has kind of changed my relationship with my mother a little bit. Wow. And even my sister and everyone in it, I think, except for one person who's still not very nice. I shall remain unnamed.
Do you want to read from your upcoming book?
I would love to, yes. So I have a copy of this one, but I don't have a copy of the new book because it doesn't exist. Two people in the world have a copy. It's Matt Haig and David Nichols. Oh. I made one of them send me a picture of him last night.
That's exciting.
I said, could I see her? Is she safe? Is she well? Have you made her tea? He was like, I have not made tea yet. I will. But so I'm going to read from the new book, but it will be from screen, which is the only way I've seen it so far. I can't wait to have it in my hands. I'm also not sure how much to read, so I'm just going to start reading and I will stop at a time when it feels like it's appropriate to stop. This is the very beginning of the book. It's this chapter is called Till February, and I'm about to get way more Irish. Expect it. By the end I'll be back in full Dublin. I'm supposed to be writing a book, but instead I find myself writing to you. I prepare the blank page, ready to pour myself onto it, but all that comes out is your absence, which feels so much more like a presence. How odd that the language of grief is one of loss. People describe feeling empty, hollow, carved out, when for me, grief is heavy. There's a weight to it, a density. In Irish, we don't say, I am sad, we say, tá brón orm. There is sadness on me. And we don't say someone is grieving, we say they are frivela, under grief. The phrase going into mourning literally translates as putting on a robe of sorrow. We wear our feelings, wrapping them around ourselves like cloaks that separate us from the world, and grief is the heaviest one of all. Today, unsatisfied with simply weighing me down, grief finds a way to slip inside me, filling me up like some tar-like creature that clogs my throat and lungs and crams itself into the cavities between my organs. You've only been gone a few hours and already I am turgid with the lack of you. I say you're gone, but you're not really, not yet. Your clothes are still hanging in the wardrobe. Your CDs are stacked alphabetically on the shelf above the stereo. Your squash racket is over there by the door. You said you wouldn't need it this week. You even left your passport here in the top drawer of your bedside table. It occurred to me just moments ago to check if it was there, and I must admit my relief at finding it. Not that it matters where you are, I suppose, if we won't be seeing each other anyway. It's just easier knowing you're stuck here too in drizzly, dark Dublin, where places carry with them reminders of me, and not sitting at a table by some quaint town square in Paris, perhaps, or maybe Croatia. Yeah, that feels right, Croatia, with its mild evenings, cobbled streets, and local beer on tap. Local women too. All of them perfect in your eyes because you don't know them yet, haven't fought with them yet, haven't seen them sick or sad or suicidal. Perched on the edge of our bed with your passport in my hands, I picture one of these women approaching you with an easy smile all over tan and oodles of sympathy for the broken-hearted boy reading a book outside her favourite cafe. I let myself linger on the scene for far too long, right up to the point where you wake up, face down, ass out, legs tangled in her ridiculously white sheets. The whole scene is, in fact, impossibly white, bright to the point of overexposure. She opens her eyes, stretches her long limbs, one corner of her mouth curls up. Good morning, she purrs. Stop it, I tell myself, flinging your passport back in the drawer. He isn't in Croatia, he's in his brother's filthy flat in Lucan. Unfortunately, knowing a story isn't real doesn't make the feelings it evokes any less real. And so I'm left with all the jealousy and rage churned up by my own pathetic work of fiction. Why can't I write an actual work of fiction? A real writer would spin this breakup into gold. A real writer would chew it up and spit out a novel so magnificent it would make all the heartbreak worthwhile. Cure it, even. A real writer would sell 1 million copies and buy herself a mansion paid for with pain. My shoulders slump forward, like my skeleton has suddenly vanished, leaving the vague shape of a human behind. I slide slug-like onto your side of the bed and instantly begin to cry. It's not a particularly loud or deliberate cry. My face doesn't contort or change. I just stare at the wall as tears flow involuntarily down my face, like blood pouring from a wound. I hate these walls, these bare eggshell walls. I hate the potential I saw in them.
Oh.
She's so sad.
No. I just feel like I was so in the scene. Yeah, your writing is just so evocative.
Thank you so much. It's so strange as well to know that people are listening to an audiobook and hearing my voice in their ears. I don't know why I can't get my head around this particular thing. But it's probably the nature of it, like the first book being so personal as well. Like, I don't know. It's crazy. It's just crazy. I don't like, it's so hard to put my finger on it. Like the idea that someone's like lying in bed in the dark, snuggled up. And I'm there, like in their head, saying like kind of intense shit.
What would your like 15-year-old self think? She'd be like, yes.
She'd probably be delighted. Yeah. I have to do that regularly. Do you ever do the what would baby Aparna think of?
I do. I have such a weird relationship with baby Aparna because I think she'd be like, who are you? You know, like
really?
Like if I visited her from the future, she'd be like, I don't know you. But not in a mean way. She was just on a different path.
Do you think you guys would get along?
Yeah, I think we just have to, warm up to each other.
Yeah. I think weirdly, I sometimes think about that interaction. I'm like, I feel like I'd get more out of it than she would.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Me too.
She was probably fun. She was probably kind of cool. I see it like when I'm hanging with my nieces or whatever. I'm like, I wonder was I like this? Because they're kind of cool.
Yeah.
And I look at my younger self a little negatively, some of the time. So I'm like, she probably was chill.
Yeah,
she was probably absolutely fine. It's randomly popped into my head because we're talking about our younger selves. The thing that really got me when you were talking about your imposter syndrome was how so you had developed an eating disorder. I'm laughing, and that sounds so mean. You had developed an eating disorder. Classic comedy. And you went to a facility of some sort to get better.
Yeah.
And you felt like an imposter.
Yeah.
in the place.
I did because my case was not severe enough for me to be an overnight patient. So
that really
they're like, you can be a day patient, but because I didn't live like in that area, they were like, okay, we guess you can be residential because you can't commute too far. And I was like,
I just love that you were like, I don't meet the criteria for it's not bad enough.
Yeah.
If only it was a more severe case, it might be taken seriously. And it was just so funny that I hadn't really thought about imposter syndrome in the flip way.
I know.
Where we've all had that thing of like, well, I'm not that depressed.
Right.
You know, well, I don't currently want to die. So like, I guess I'm okay.
I've definitely had that thought with like
to
anxiety and depression where I'm like, oh, she wears hers so much better. Such a better depressor.
Yeah. She's a better anxious wreck.
Yeah.
Than
Which
I
I'm
am.
like, what a screwed up thought.
If she's monetizing it better.
Yeah, exactly.
Or her joke about it was
merch.
Funny. Yeah, she's got anxiety merch. I'm looking at Anna now. You monetize your depression way better than me, babe. You're my goals. I feel like we're probably gonna need to wrap up because people are. Yeah, it's just gone 7.
Perfect.
Thank you so much for all the questions and for coming along.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Also sign up for my newsletter at zibbyowens.com and sign up for my virtual book club and meet lots of authors on Zoom every other week. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music.